We're live. Hi, Gil. Welcome
Hi,
to
Grace.
Grace. To start with the show, I would love for the audience to get to know you a little bit more. So you started your career as a hardware engineer, and
Yes.
maybe we could talk about, and then you have like funded your own company back in like 2008, and you have like worked on other businesses like consulting with your co-founder, and before you joined Stanford, and then eventually founded the Blockchain Builders Fund. Maybe we could talk about like what were some core lessons you've learned early on in your career, kind of shape you into who you are today.
Oh, that's a great question. Okay, I guess a few things from a technology perspective. I think the most important thing was just studying to be an engineer. I actually grew up as very much like the theater music person who loved science, but I was much more, I would say, on the artsy side of things. And while at university, I was studying electrical engineering, started understanding how the world worked, and decided to go full on into the engineering side of things. But really, engineering taught me structured thinking and how to break down a problem, whether it was technical or non-technical, into its pieces, and how to strategize, how to put it together, and rigorously solve that problem. I think you can write small programs, but by just kind of winging it. But anything large needed very specific analysis and planning, and I took that with me throughout my career. I would say from and then continuing onwards, like hardware was important, 20 years ago, though it wasn't necessarily, there wasn't a lot of innovation. You couldn't really build a startup, in 2002 on the hardware and chip design side of things. But I was actually working on gallium nitride transistors then, which have now become standard in kind of every single laptop charger that people have, all the GAN. But really understanding how chips work and the limitations of chips from a hardware perspective is highly relevant now, and has been as we go to crypto. As we look at new chip designs, from ASICs, TPUs, GPUs, and the like. So kind of understanding that has given me a really great perspective. And I would say similarly on the data infrastructure side, I was building and doing a lot in the distributed compute space and the big data space. And this is I was working in kind of distributed computing and big data from 2006, and then I started my companies in 2008 and 2010. And while I didn't necessarily, blockchain didn't exist back then, but as I found my way in the blockchain space, really a lot of what we're doing, especially now, is the same thing that I was doing, kind of building enterprise data infrastructure and distributed compute infrastructure and big data infrastructure. We're just doing it and replicating that entire stack in a trustless way. So now it's not just distributed computing with servers that are all owned by like British Petroleum or the IRS or JP Morgan, but you take these same concepts of distributed computing and now you split it where anyone can run these servers and run this compute infrastructure, and they need to do it in a trusted way. And how do you do that? Through consensus, through zero knowledge proofs, through trusted enclaves. But in particular, now as blockchain is finding adoption, we're really looking at, okay, well, how do we take this technology infrastructure really that helps us run large computations, and especially now as we move into the world of AI, gain much deeper insight and help us kind of act and react in a real-time manner, and just build that for enterprise, because that's the large use case, is every single company using this infrastructure, and that's where blockchain is now gaining adoption.
Oh wow, love that. By the way, shout out to hi Anthony. Okay, so I was wondering, so like maybe we'll talk about the Blockchain Builders Fund. So like I know that you guys invest in like Stanford community builders, and then like primarily focus on like just like technical students to help them build, and like kind of building out this ecosystem to partner with like people from like Coinbase Ventures or like some other professors or like some other like you guys had your own like kind of series of like speakers of like these bigger like crypto leaders. Maybe we could talk about like building the community itself, and then what are some trends and also maybe insights on like building that community kind of like taught you. Meanwhile, I'm gonna quickly shut out my window because it's just like really I feel like the construction people will come and help me. I'll be right back.
Sure thing. Um, so while we're waiting for you to come back,
Oh, I'm back.
okay, awesome.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, my path to or into blockchain and then back into blockchain is kind of an interesting one. Initially, I got into blockchain in 2016 when I was at business school. And that was after I'd kind of built a couple of companies in this kind of enterprise data infrastructure and big data infrastructure space. Um, but at the time, like 2016, 17, early 18, the focus was on bringing blockchain technology to industry, and it was all like every single bank and manufacturer and large utility company had a blockchain project. But the challenge was at the time the technology just wasn't feasible enough. Like it wasn't, Ethereum had just come out and people were really excited about the possibilities, but kind of similar to the AR cycle around 2015, 16, the AR/VR cycle, it was just too early, right? At the time, blockchain was too slow, too expensive, too difficult to use. And ultimately, I think after like Libra collapsed, there were concerns around the regulatory side of things. So enterprise kind of took a back seat. And I kind of, there were also a lot of pump and dump schemes and ICOs back in those days. Uh, so I also pivoted out of blockchain. And then I got back in when I actually went back to Stanford to do a second degree, this time in policy, because I was investing in a lot of heavily regulated industries as an angel investor, including finance, health tech, energy, etc. And while back at Stanford, a friend, Kun Peng, who's now my partner, had started an accelerator for blockchain, and this is in 21. And I joined as a mentor because I like helping founders. I was transitioning from founder to angel investor to at that point hopeful venture capitalist. And I think the difference was I saw a ton of incredibly talented technical founders, like the sharpest people getting their graduate degrees, and a number of really sharp undergrads as well, were building kind of at the forefront. And they were at the cusp of, scalability, zero knowledge proofs, like things that had been 10 to 15 years away were now all of a sudden 2 to 4 years away, or potentially a year away. So I could really see like the potential of actually the technology is almost there, and once it's there, then enterprise adoption really would potentially be ready, or at least large scale adoption would be plausible, pending regulatory concerns. So that kind of drew me back in. And necessarily it was, what was missing at that time was really the technology, right? If blockchain is a technology layer that relies on network effects, if you're difficult to use, if you're slow, if you're expensive, if you have high friction points at every time you use it, then that just kills network effects. So kind of we were looking heavily at supporting founders that were building infrastructure to really tackle all of these these technical problems of scalability, cost, usability, interoperability. And that was kind of where we started. And the accelerator ended up being super successful. We've had 85 teams raise close to $1 billion from all the leading VCs. And we just found this way of nurturing this founder ecosystem at Stanford at the time. Now, this was the accelerator was and is a free program for Stanford students and alum. And free programs, while they're wonderful, don't pay rent. So we started a fund off the back of that, and that's Blockchain Builders. I think what's interesting is now that the technology, blockchain has shifted from where the infrastructure and the technology itself isn't necessarily wasn't ready for prime time. Now it is, and now that the Trump administration has been highly favorable from a regulatory perspective, it's actually the opposite problem. Now you need a ton of people that really understand enterprise. So now we're starting to get like business school people back into the game as well, and kind of bridging those worlds of the engineering school and the technical founders and those people with actual experience in different sectors, and you absolutely need kind of this sector expertise to be successful if you're going to be pitching to JP Morgan, Citibank, BlackRock, or like large utility players, etc.
For sure. I wanted to learn more about like I guess like nowadays I feel like as you mentioned, crypto is like a lot more I want to say legitimized. Well, I feel like it's more mainstream.
Yes.
And maybe we could talk about like, the stable coin aspect of things. So like I mean a lot of our audience are primarily people are focusing on AI and maybe they're like not everybody's like super familiar with the term as well as like I guess like what is a reason for it to make a huge comeback and maybe if you could give us some history about stablecoin and why is it kind of like making a splash. Well, I'm just like listening to the mainstream kind of like media positioning on stablecoin, and then also like the founders I have backed in the AI space. I guess a small angel investor. Um, Everybody kind of like started having some sort of like play about stablecoin in the fintech space. Maybe we could talk about like the kind of like the history of it, and then what does it kind of like imply, and then the application side of things as well.
Sure, definitely. So I think like, let me take a quick step back. I think there's two parts of this question. One is like why is blockchain actually of value here? The other is why specifically stablecoins and why are they of value? And I think what the Bitcoin white paper really did was lay out a new model for software architecture, right? So up until the Bitcoin white paper, every single piece of software had to run on specific servers that people would basically control. So, or they would outsource it to kind of a cloud provider. So what do I mean by this? I mean, the IRS, which was one of my customers back in the day with my startup, like if they wanted to run all of their servers at the time it was on mainframe, then they moved on to, like Oracle databases and then kind of big databases, MongoDB. Like those servers needed to physically sit somewhere so that they would have control of those servers. And they were either like an IRS server farms or they were controlled by Amazon, and that was a whole digital transformation thing, right? Same with, with Citigroup, same with, think of any application that you use, Facebook, Google, their application would be running on servers that they controlled. And that was necessary both from a security standpoint, a network security standpoint, um, a reliability standpoint. But what this ultimately means is that you couldn't have software as a public good, right? Because software is a public good. Well, who's going to run this public good? And what I mean by public good, I mean like think of who maintains parks and roads, electricity lines. Right, this idea of infrastructure as a public good, which is critical to us in the physical world, could never really exist in the digital world because all software had to run on computers that were controlled by specific organizations and entities and people. So what Bitcoin basically said was, let's create an application that could be run by everyone for everyone in a way where you didn't need to necessarily trust that person because the software itself was proving that people were honest in how it was operating,
Mhm.
right? And this is a paradigm shift of software being able to be run by and for groups of people. So initially, we saw a lot of consortiums come on board here. And as we move in our lives from being purely physical lives to more and more of our lives are lived in the digital space, the idea that every single digital interaction we would have would be owned by a profit-seeking private company doesn't really make sense, right? We want to have infrastructure that can be used, digital infrastructure that can be used by and for everyone. And that was the original promise, I think, of the internet. And of HTTP and the internet standard and FTP and SMTP, right? The email and file transfer and internet standards. But the reality became that each of these kind of ended up being gobbled up by private companies. Email by Gmail, the internet by one of your providers, whether it was Google or the page that you entered into, or Amazon. You wanted to search for them, you go to Amazon.com. If it was to buy something, if it was you're searching for something in general, it was Google. So if you were on Maps, Apple Maps perhaps was your interface, but more and more you weren't going to this open internet that anyone could access. You were going specifically to these closed or Meta and Facebook, these closed environments that would have control over your experience. And that wasn't necessarily the promise of an open internet. So blockchain came and created this concept of digital infrastructure, right? And shared infrastructure as a public good for people. Now, for better or worse, the 2016 to 2018 cycle that had all of this promise for technology infrastructure for consortiums, it didn't work because the technology wasn't there. But there were two use cases that kind of did start to come out of that, and that found product market fit because the need was so great. One was owning a US dollar,
Mm.
and that's what stable coins are. The other was gambling. And ultimately, because that's what was used for fundraising purposes, right? People wanted access to early stage blockchain companies, so there were these ICOs, and then they were able to kind of fundraise because there was high potential. And if you were if you were just a normal Joe who didn't have access to early stage venture deals, like there was no other way for you to gain access to these high alpha type companies. So fundraising became an interesting use case. Then you had all these tokens and people wanted to trade these tokens. So those were the two use cases. But stablecoins specifically were the ones that people used across emerging markets because there are so many countries that have unstable and unreliable financial systems. And having the US dollar or access to the US dollar is not a foregone conclusion if you live in Argentina, in Turkey, in Indonesia, in Nigeria, in Venezuela, right? So there are all these countries with unstable economies potentially, or currencies that might fluctuate significantly. And if you've been working all your life and you're in the bottom 50% of the world's GDP, if your economy collapses or your currency collapses, then all of your value and all of your assets collapse. And you can't just open up a bank account if you live in Lebanon, right? Or a US dollar bank account if you live in Lebanon, because they don't want, the country itself wants controls over its currencies. So stablecoins found a huge use case here, I'd say over the last kind of 5 to 10 years. And for better or worse, Tron did a really good job of actually kind of really spreading this across emerging markets. Now, what's happened is uh, that use case of a shared ledger for transferring assets and specifically transferring US dollars, but also transferring securities or bonds, treasuries, and the like, is incredibly useful. Because right now, if I want to transfer money in my bank account, right, really what I need to do is I go to Wells Fargo, I type in a whole bunch of information, but I don't actually have my money. Wells Fargo is holding my money for me. And I ask Wells Fargo to transfer my money to Grace Gong's bank account, and maybe you bank with Citi or with Chase, right? But you don't actually hold your money either. So I'm asking Wells Fargo to move the money that they hold on my behalf to you. And if Wells Fargo goes down or if Chase goes down, it's insured up to a certain point. But who knows how long that's going to take. And if I want to transfer money to someone who lives in France or in Japan, it can take days. And when I was getting married and my wife and I got married in France, literally some of our transfers would take 3 to 5 weeks. And that's just not feasible. So the ability to have a shared ledger that everyone is on and to transfer money instantaneously is incredibly valuable. And the ability to hold your own money and have custody of your own money is incredibly valuable. And then the ability to do that with securities, where if you want to trade Tesla stock or Nvidia stock, it takes up to 3 days for that to settle, which means there are only so many trades you can do at a time in a certain amount of time. But if you actually have custody of that and the trade happens instantaneously and you can settle it instantly, now the volume of transactions can significantly increase. So this has really been the promise of blockchain, but in large part because the technology wasn't actually highly usable until about 1 to 2 years outside of stablecoins, and the other was I'd say in large part because of regulation. Your large banks weren't actually considering this as a technology infrastructure, and now that the technology actually, it flies. You have all of these highly performant layer ones and layer twos, whether it's Solana, Arbitrum, Base, that are actually optimized for enterprise capabilities because they've been focusing on being mature enough to support enterprise needs. And now that it is also legal, like they're adopting it in droves because it actually provides a tremendous amount of value for banks to be able to have kind of this instant settlement, this reduced counterparty risk, right? That this 24-hour operation, instead of you can only send a wire Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 a.m. In U.S. business hours, and if someone is in the Emirates, well, they're actually Sunday to Thursday, so now you have 3 days of overlap to send someone money.
For sure. I have a question about the backend though. Like, I wonder, so like, how does it, so for example, if you use like Wells Fargo, I use Chase, and then like in the backend, is that like actual money transferring like cash, or is this just like I gave you X number and then you give me X number, and then um we only kind of match up with the differences of, and then like the differences I will carry a bag of cash and then send it to your bank, or how does it kind of work?
So,
With
so
Carl,
yeah,
yeah.
there are a few different. So the traditional way is, Wells Fargo has a bunch of cash and it just has a database entry for Gil Rosen. Chase has a bunch of cash and it has a database entry for Grace Gong. And when I send money, I make a Swift request, like not using blockchain.
Mhm,
Like I make a request to Wells Fargo. They send a Swift message, and Chase then receives that Swift message. They send a reply, and there's just like long messaging back and forth where they each tell each other and confirm that they're going to update their databases with a certain amount of money. Now, that process itself also takes time to settle, which is why wires can take, 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, etc. Especially if this bank doesn't exactly talk directly to that bank, right? So
mhm,
if Bank A is in the US, Bank B is in the suburbs of France, they might have to go through all of these intermediary banks sending messages in this like long, complicated game of telephone.
mhm,
Now, the way it works in blockchain is twofold. If I'm going to send you money directly and the money's in my wallet and the money's in your wallet,
mhm.
well, our wallets are both on the blockchain,
Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right? So we're just updating the exact same system instantaneously because we've given each other kind of the address to send to, and then I use my private keys to actually update
Mhm,
my wallet, saying yes, send this money to Grace's wallet. So it's instantaneously because they're the same database. It's not these two different databases that are being run by two different banks independently. It's this one database that's being operated publicly for hundreds of thousands or millions of people. Now, if Wells Fargo and Chase use a blockchain, which many of them are actually onboarding onto blockchain, right? JP Morgan has JP Morgan Coin, which is actually running, they've migrated to the base blockchain.
mhm,
Um, and really what they're doing there is they have their own kind of blockchain layer where they're maintaining a wallet with all of the accounts for their users.
mhm.
Uh, and that same blockchain might be used, Base or any of the other EVM-based chains, for instance, that can settle onto Ethereum, might be being used by another bank. So when they make that transfer, it's no longer this long series of messages that has to go from bank to bank to bank, back and forth, communicating, verifying that they're going to make this change, and then waiting to update their records until they've both confirmed that the change has been made. They're both just moving money from one wallet to another, which again is instantaneous on the bank's back end side.
Wow. Okay. So I wonder, so like, I guess it's just like the updating the number, but like there's no actual transfer of cash.
Uh, when banks are doing it, the banks themselves are
Mhm.
actually transferring cash from one bank to another, right? If they're using a blockchain, because Wells Fargo will have a wallet and Chase will have a wallet, and they're actually moving money from one wallet to another wallet.
Got it. So like who is counting the cash? Is there like a department? I'm sorry, I'm getting so much detail into this stablecoin thing. I'm like just curious, like, is there someone actually gonna count the cash every day? Just like literally like a person's job is to like go to Wells Fargo, and then who is transferring the money? Is that like the main department from Wells Fargo in New York, or like would it be like, I mean, I don't think Wells Fargo is in New York, but like let's say Chase. Like if Chase is in New York, like is someone gonna actually go to another bank and then flying the money out to the Chase headquarters to transfer there? Or like is this more of like I gave my local branch and then local branch like bring a bag of cash every night to the other? banks.
So you mean in the traditional use case or in the blockchain use case? Because in the
Uh,
blockchain use case, the act of the like Chase
mhm,
or Wells Fargo's their servers and their computer systems are directly tied to a blockchain. So when I make a request on the application to make a transfer, again, this is all theoretical. I don't know if I know JP Morgan is on chain and they actually use it not for retail but for their enterprise clients. But when you make a request, if you're one of JP Morgan's enterprise clients, you make a request, then yes, JP Morgan will actually like their application for that you work with on your banking application
mhm.
is integrated with the blockchain, and it will go and actually execute a transfer, an on-chain transfer that happens instantaneously from their wallet to the recipient bank's wallet. Um, Now, before that, what was happening before that, they were settling over multiple days, right? And they would be updating their records and confirming their records over multiple days. They weren't physically sending bags of cash, but we're starting to go beyond I believe it's like transferring ownership or custody of treasuries and other assets.
Got it. Okay, so maybe we go back to the blockchain accelerator. So when you guys are picking the technical founders, like I know that like some of the founders that you back, like I think I at least know two and three actually from the party you, me,
Oh
Tony.
yeah, yeah.
So I guess like when you are picking the founders, like what would be the benchmark that you're picking them, and then what are some like newer, I would say top three trends in the blockchain space that you feel like are very popular right now?
Great question. So I would actually caveat this that what we're doing now is probably different than what we were doing 2, 3 years ago. So
Mhm,
2, 3 years ago, we were very heavily focused on the technology infrastructure side of things. And when I was doing investing on the Web2 side, I've got 50 or so angel investments that are non-blockchain. I had this thesis that if you were going to invest in a company, it had to have three things. It had to have a technology expert, right? Someone who's an engineer, ideally someone that also knows AI or machine learning, because that was even 10 years ago, that was kind of up and coming. But you needed an engineer that could build. You needed someone on the business side that knows how to run a business, that understands startup strategy and venture strategy, which is its own unique skill set that can run and manage people, that can kind of operate the business side of things. And you needed domain expertise, right? Because you were building in a sector. If it was healthcare, then you needed a doctor, someone that knew the healthcare space. If it was finance, you needed someone that was, had worked in finance or in payments, or if it was in energy, because ultimately you're building a solution and a product for someone, right? Someone needs to use this. Uh, and that was the premise. And it didn't need to be three people. It could be one person. It could be two people that had those skill sets. But you needed those three things. When I moved into blockchain in back into blockchain in 21, we were running the accelerator. You didn't really need as much domain expertise anymore because a lot of blockchain was building infrastructure for other blockchain people. So it was kind of just the engineers building for engineers. And there was this idea that if you built a technology and the technology worked and it worked well, then other people would adopt it. And part of your go-to-market in launching this token is that there would be a lot of awareness in the market of what the technology could do, and people would then acquire that token. And that was kind of your go-to-market side of things.
mhm,
Uh, there was also this kind of euphoric vision of a company didn't really need to be a company of a team of people. It could actually be a lot of distributed people that are contributing in a very distributed way to a project together. And that was like the ethos behind Ethereum and the like. So there was this experimentation around different structures of company, and kind of all you needed was potentially engineers,
mhm,
right, who were working together to build really good technology.
mhm,
Um, what ended up happening is that didn't work.
mhm,
And I think Solana is actually a great example of the opposite. Solana uh, treated blockchain as if it were an enterprise company, right?
mhm,
And a lot of this idea that you could build in a decentralized fashion implies that you also already have a product market fit, right? It implies that you're this large ecosystem that everyone can contribute to, and you can have governance, and it's almost running like a state. But blockchain was actually a little too early at that point because we didn't really have enterprise adoption or large scale adoption outside of stablecoin payments in certain regions, and gambling and trading coins and memes and the like. So if you actually want to move quickly in a certain direction, you need to have a lot more structure. You need a team to work together. You need a product manager, right? And similarly, if you want to gain like real true adoption from an enterprise perspective, an institutional perspective, you need to understand their needs, right? And the Solana Foundation did a really good job here of working together with a high amount of focus on a certain number of industries. So initially they looked at DePIN, then that, kind of because they were really performant, for better or worse, memes became a huge part of their portfolio. But then they really put a lot of focus into digital finance and payments. And they brought in people from sectors and they from the sectors, and they would kind of talk to people within those industries about how they can build solutions for them. I think Arbitrum did a really good job of this as well, right? Where they were really highly focused on these enterprise use cases and on running the company like a traditional company would be run. So I would say now when we're looking at founders, we're actually looking at a very similar thing, which is one, okay, do you have a technology that or an approach to the technology that is ideally, that has some sort of moat, that is innovative, that is solving a problem uniquely? Because in blockchain especially, these are open technologies. Many people can quickly copy them. So you need to be able to continuously innovate on this. So you need a really strong technical team to uniquely solve a problem. And whereas before we were looking potentially more on just scalability, interoperability, usability, cost, now we're looking more at privacy, compliance, kind of these enterprise institutional grade or like retail UX grade types of experiences that people can have. The other is we're looking a lot more at those same initial things of when I was working as a Web2 investor, which are you need domain expertise. So we want people that understand the markets they're building for, have experience in them, and have a clear go-to-market for commercialization where someone is going to be willing to pay for this. I think what's interesting is people started caring about revenue in blockchain about a year ago. And everyone is saying like, oh, this is a revenue meta. Now people like revenue, but then that's going to shift. When the reality of it is no, like the fact that people care about revenue means that there's an expectation of revenue, and blockchain has actually reached maturity as a space. And you're seeing a lot of we're in a bearish market now. A lot of the tokens that have launched in the last year that are doing well are tokens that have clear cash flows and potentially have algorithmic buyback. So it's either a direct utility, or they're just generating fees and able to buy back their token in a very traditional way, like you have, in Web2 kind of public companies that have stock buybacks. And ultimately, like what matters is, are you able to actually, like, is someone willing to pay for your platform and protocol? And then does that build an ecosystem? I think the other thing that we're maybe looking for a lot more is there was this idea that if you build a technology, people will come and use it, right? And the reality has been that that didn't happen very much. And actually, you needed to go to specific sectors and domains of people and build things for them. And what we're seeing a lot more is what's big in the Web2 space traditionally from a technology strategy perspective. Amazon built a bookstore that they then opened up as a platform to selling everything. Right. Salesforce built a CRM product. Then once they had significant kind of adoption, they opened that up as a platform, force.com, for kind of any enterprise type applications. Uber built, a cab service that they then opened up as a logistics infrastructure for food, for, packages, for a whole slew of other things. And we're seeing that kind of in the blockchain space as well, where you have, Hyperliquid built a perp dex, right? They found distribution. They are now taking that perp dex and transforming that into a platform where other people can build, and they're launching their own chain, and anyone can build anything on top of that. Robinhood, which has its own kind of customer base, is now building its own chain, and then they'll open that up as a means for other people to build kind of these ecosystem applications that are interoperable with it. Uniswap again, they were an exchange. They've opened that up to Unichain. So it's this idea of actually, if you build a really good app and you gain distribution, you can then open that up as an open ecosystem for other people to go and build for that same distribution. So that strategy is really kind of starting to be adopted in blockchain. And I think that in part is going to drive a lot more adoption overall, because you're building for actual use cases that have revenues. You then have distribution, and now you open that up to an ecosystem play where anyone can build in these open, interoperable ecosystems that just continue to compound on themselves.
For sure. I have a question about building up the distribution. I feel like the crypto space kind of like lead the, I guess, like open source. I mean, maybe I could be completely wrong, but I feel like a lot of the AI builders are coming from the crypto era. So like nowadays, like in the traditional like just SaaS space, like people are building open source stuff. I feel like that's coming out of the crypto related effect to a degree. And I wonder, when you're thinking about like, since you mentioned about like Solana's like, I guess like the advantage is like Solana is like a building the company as like a centralized ecosystem, and like, or like centralized, or like a traditional company. Can you elaborate on that? Like, why are they so successful? And I guess like, what is the why is that better than like just like completely decentralized? And then what do you feel like lead to the decentralized business model or like company that kind of like um I wouldn't say failing, but like not as good as like centralized system?
So I think a big question here is the first one. Well, there's two parts to this. One is the company running in a centralized or decentralized manner, and the other is the technology itself decentralized, right? So they're all building decentralized ecosystems. At the end of this is decentralized technology, right? The blockchain itself is decentralized. It's being run in theory by you know, in a permissionless way, or at least that's the end state. Um, I think the challenge is, when do you start decentralizing? And I think early on in blockchain, there was this thesis that you could build in a decentralized manner from the ground up, and everyone could contribute, and everything needed to be decentralized from the beginning. And the problem with that is that you don't have a very clear direction, because everyone wants to potentially build something slightly different, and they're going in all of these different directions. And you can't move as far and as fast if you're trying to design by committee or design in an open space where everyone is kind of building in different directions. So I think both as a company as well as a technology infrastructure, it's not whether you should decentralize, it's a question of when you decentralize, right? And if you start building something in a decentralized fashion, it's just very difficult to have this fast, cohesive growth. Whereas if you build something in a more centralized fashion, from a company standpoint, you have product managers, you have direction, you have everyone that is aligned and working towards a common goal. So you're able to move much faster. And what I mean by that is you have, a technology team that's building the underlying technology infrastructure. You have applications that are focused on the same direction, the same sectors for that infrastructure. So you're able to create network effects faster. You have a sales and marketing team that's going and making awareness within that given enterprise, within that given sector, of what's available and why it's actually of value. So you have this entire team that's kind of moving together in a given direction, and that just moves much faster. And that's why I think Solana and Arbitrum and Avalanche for a while, and Base, were able to move so much faster than, say, Ethereum has been traditionally. Now Ethereum is changing, right? So they have new leadership. Tomas has come in. They're starting to have much more direction in terms of how they go, because they realize that they were building as if they had found product market fit, and blockchain had reached its end state, and now you just had this large ecosystem to manage. Now, once you hit product market fit and you have a large ecosystem and you are the ecosystem, you want to give a voice to all of your users so that they stay involved. So having decentralized governance makes a ton of sense if you're kind of in this end state, and you're not trying to compete with fast-moving competitors in very specific sectors.
Mhm.
So I think ultimately that's why from a company direction, it made a big difference. I would say also from a technology perspective, if you're focused more on the ideals of decentralization in the beginning,
Mhm.
you might not be building the right thing, and you're focusing on kind of how do I right. Ultimately, what you want to be focusing on in the first few years of a company is, am I creating value for an end user? Now, the
Mhm.
principles of decentralization are important because you want to, remove censorship. You want to make sure anyone can participate, and these are the core principles of blockchain that we love. That Bitcoin kind of represents at its fundamental layer. But if you're focused on, permissionlessness and censorship resistance from the very beginning, now you're spending engineering hours and bringing on people who are potentially adverse players initially, and enabling them to participate in something that hasn't actually proven that it works and delivers value to the end user. So it's not that we shouldn't care about these things, it's a question of when we care about them. And that's why most chains, when they initially launch, they have centralized sequencers and validators, and they'll launch their test nets first, and many of them will launch in a centralized manner initially with the aim of transitioning to being decentralized in the future once they gain enough adoption and there's an element of trust there. Now, we are starting to get there with many of these blockchains, right? Solana is decentralizing significantly more, and you kind of see this across the gamut of L2s and this idea of decentralized sequencers, and permissionless validators, etc. But you're also seeing the opposite happen, where you're having more permission chains crop up because they allow, especially for enterprise adoption, a bank wants to know that its transactions are not being kind of leveraged or touching North Korean servers. Right? Or they're not necessarily touching non-KYC people because they need to be compliant. So I think the idea is not, do we want permissionlessness and censorship resistance and decentralization? It's a question of like when we want that and when the right time to bring that in is. And same with an enterprise governance perspective. It's not, do you want to have representation of your user base? It's when do you want to bring in that representation? And first, you need to build that user base, and it's easier to do that in a centralized manner.
Wow. I wonder, so like when I really like what you said about like the timing as well as like, I guess like the commercial readiness of it. And I wonder like maybe we could talk about some of your portfolio companies. So some of the companies that coming out of the Stanford Blockchain Accelerator is Story Protocol and Caldera. And then like, one of my favorites slash I'm also a small investor into hyperbolic. Maybe we could talk about like the how do you kind of like find the funders and then like how do you kind of like help them to succeed from um, the Stanford Blockchain Club and the
Uh,
Stanford Blockchain Accelerator. Sorry.
definitely. So, uh, you named three interesting companies. Story actually wasn't part of the accelerator, though we worked with them very closely. They did come out of Stanford, and they were and are a great team that was kind of building at the forefront. And they've actually been super supportive of everything at Stanford. They would come to all of our events and support founder ecosystems. But ultimately, Caldera was actually in our first cohort. Matt and Parker are awesome founders, but they were super young at the time. And really, they built an impressive kind of infrastructure there. And then Jasper actually came out of the Berkeley ecosystem of all things,
Mhm.
that was right across the bay. And ultimately, I think it's about building community and ecosystem. So, the things that our team helps run and operate is we teach a class on blockchain entrepreneurship in the engineering school. And we bring in thought leaders. And the idea there is, how do we create this open space for the top leaders in the industry to speak about their sectors in DeFi, in digital finance, in the intersection of blockchain and AI across infrastructure. And we've had Vitalik come and speak. We've had Toli, the founder of Solana, speak, Chris Larson, the founder of Ripple, etc. And that was a course. These are all teams in the accelerator. Then once we run the course and it's open to students primarily, but anyone can kind of come and visit. And then we have this accelerator, which is open to Stanford students and alumni. And really what we do is we have two cohorts twice a year of 10 to 12 teams. And we work with them, and it's completely free for a period of 12 weeks to really help them on a bi-weekly basis with company building, right? Because building a company is very different than just building a technology. And building a blockchain company is different than building a regular venture. So we have kind of thought leaders come and speak about the different elements of how do you find product market fit in blockchain? How do you iterate over which specific sectors you should start with and go after? How do you think about blockchain architecture and tokenomics and how that plays into your overall kind of strategy and what you should build when? How do you think about go-to-market and business development, marketing and partnerships and ecosystem building, which happen much sooner in blockchain than it does in a traditional Web2 company? So we really work with these teams almost like side by side, meeting with them on a bi-weekly basis, helping them kind of get to that place where they have a very clear strategy and story and a validated direction and ideally have traction. And then we help them raise capital and we maintain super close relationships with all the top funds, Andreessen, Dragonfly, Electric, 1KX, Variant, and the like. Blockchain capital, etc. And they know that when we share projects with them, they're going to be projects that are highly vetted, that have thought through all of these elements of building a company, from the technology, the competitive modes that they'll have, the go-to-market, what the value proposition is, the team structure. So they know that there's a level of maturity that comes out of that, and they've ended up supporting a significant number of projects that come out of the accelerator. So for us, a lot of this is like, how do we meet people? It's by putting on these. Now, one last thing. In the accelerator, we also do a number of sessions for each of these topics, and those are open to everyone. Right? We'll do on-campus sessions and on-campus events, and those are open to everyone. And we'll run these big blockchain application Stanford Summit events, and those are also open to everyone. And the idea is, how do we create as much useful content and support for the general ecosystem for founders to want to come to? And then, if we're doing this and we're supporting founders at the beginning, and then we're also meeting them, and then they want us to continue to support them. And that's also then where the fund comes in, where the fund, Blockchain Builders Fund then helps invest and support many of these founders, because people value the things that we're doing to help them with their ideation, with their product strategy, their go-to-market strategy, their fundraising.
Love that. I also want to be mindful of the time. Maybe we start the mini fire round section. What's your favorite book?
Favorite book? I think that there's three books that really spoke to me. They're very different. Probably The Fountainhead, Cat's Cradle, and Sartre's Nausea. And those are three very different books, and I don't agree with much of what they have to say, but I think like Cat's Cradle and The Fountainhead are like these polar opposites of Kurt Vonnegut, speaking about the meaninglessness of everything and kind of what matters in the world and human connection, and The Fountainhead being much more like self-reliance and this like 1920s, even though it's probably to a fault, and I've veered away from that. And Sartre's Nausea is this idea of kind of in a world where if you overthink things, you kind of destroy them, and the importance of experience and creation, and being in the moment, so to speak.
For sure. I mean, it sounds very Burning Man, but okay, who would you invite to your dinner party?
Who would I invite to a dinner party? I would be fascinated to have a conversation. I think a mix of Elon Musk, Bill Gates, also as kind of these polar opposite directions of looking at tech in the world and affecting change. I think from who else would be interesting? I think Obama would be a fascinating guest for, again, whether or not I agree with kind of all of his policies over the years. I think as someone who's incredibly introspective and thinks very deeply about things, I think I got to throw in, an artist or two in there. Kanye would be absolutely fascinating. I think he's somewhat unhinged, but he's also incredibly introspective. Madonna, similarly, I think would be absolutely fascinating. Yeah, there's probably a few others.
Love that. Who made the biggest impact in your career?
Um, I would say there are two people, two kind of things that separately impacted me significantly. One is in my second job at a company called Informatica, I had a manager named Gopal, uh, and he treated me and his team almost as friends, right? And there was an element of trust, and we would go out together, we would drink together, and there was a true trust and friendship there, and it was kind of like we were in a family. And this was in the UK at the time, and that became kind of my model for being a manager when I started my companies, and it was this idea of like absolute trust and a familial atmosphere where we were all together in this. But at the same time, like if I fucked up in work, like there was almost an embarrassment of disappointing this person that believed in me, trusted me, and supported me so much. And at the same time, I think there's an element of leadership and direction that needs to come from a leader. But he did a really good job of kind of inspiring me on how I could be a manager, and that then helped me as a manager. And when I built Excella, we won Forbes Best Place to Work, in large part because we managed to build such an amazing kind of work environment that people just love to be there and to work together. Um, I'd say the other is not a person, but candidly, like business school at Stanford. It just really gave me a framework for how to think about every aspect of life, from the technology to the venture strategy to the personal, and how to really consider things from a theoretical standpoint and a framework standpoint, and to break these problems down. And finding product market fit for a venture is actually not that different from finding market fit. My wife will hate me for saying this, in love and relationships, and finding product market fit in life, and just being authentic to yourself, and building on those strengths and finding the people that most connects with.
Love that. Where can we find you outside of work?
Now most of the time is with my 7-month-old son.
Mm.
Uh, Outside of that, my wife and I, we love the arts. We love museums. We went to Paul Taylor dance show yesterday in New York. I'm in New York. I spent a lot of time in the Bay. But I was a pianist and musician for a long time. So we love jazz. We love dance. I love traveling. I love good food. So yeah, experiencing the beauty that others create, and co-creating beauty with others, right? Putting on events, the Burning Man ethos in some ways, of creating experiences for other people. I think that's something that really speaks to me.
Love that. Well, Gil, thank you so much for coming to the show today. It was such a fun conversation, and yeah, it's such a master class in crypto and blockchain.
Grace, thank you. This is an absolute pleasure. Really into this. Thanks again.
Amazing. Thank you. Let me quickly end stream.